my name is Kristen and this is Kristen Craves Books. As you can see from all the empty spaces on my shelves, today I'm going to be talking about my best books of 2023, finally. I haven't had a moment to sit down and film this, but I've been really excited to. Obviously, it's my favorite video of the year to film. It's my favorite video of the year to watch. I tried to narrow it down to 10. I was going to have 5 honorable mentions, but then I just realized that the 5 I was going to leave off, they're true favorites, so there are no rules to this. I have my 15 favorite books. I've read 143 or 144 books in 2023. These are my top 15. And I did try and rank them. If you ask me tomorrow, the list could be different. I'm pretty solid with my top 5. But other than that, it's hard to rank them. And again, I just had to go to 15. I couldn't bring it down to 10. I sat there for ages trying to, and it was nearly impossible, which I think is amazing. That is a sign that I had a really solid year of reading. I'm going to talk about these in order from my 15th, working up all the way to my #1 book of the year, which turned out to be an easy book to choose for me this year, even though we had some great contenders. So let's just do this or we'll be here all day. So my first one in the 15th spot is a book that was on so many people's best lists last year and the year before, but I finally got around to it in 2023 and it deserves all the hype. You guys were right, it is fantastic, and that is A Diary of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I am now an S.T. Gibson stan. I follow her on Instagram. I'm part of her broadcast channel where she announces everything she's got going on. I have arcs of her next 2 books. I will read whatever she puts out, and that all stems from this one book. It is just that beautiful. This is the only thing I've read from her, and I love her. This is epistolary. So if you're not a fan of epistolary novels, especially written in second person, because we're following Costanza, who is Dracula's first bride, and she is writing letters to Dracula, though she never names him, and I think there's something really powerful in that in and of itself. But she is working through their relationship and coming to grips with the fact that this was a violent, unhealthy relationship that she was forced into despite the fact that she loves him. And the things that she's willing to sacrifice for him, but then slowly you see her coming to love other people and maybe some of the other brides in his life and caring about them more than she cares about herself, more than she cares about Dracula. And it's just such a journey. This was so beautifully written. It's one of those books that could have easily been overwrought, but I thought S.T. Gibson balanced that line perfectly. I did read some books with Purple Pearls in 2023 that I don't think nailed it, but this is one that I really did. It's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. I need to reread it and annotate it at some point because there are so many quotable moments, but I have this very limited edition and it's too beautiful to annotate. So it's probably one that I will look for at a secondhand bookstore or something and grab a copy and annotate that one for myself because they're just, it's so beautiful. I can't even begin to explain this to you. It's short. I read it in an afternoon. It's an experience, one that I will probably pick up again and again. In 14th place is a book that I don't own but really should, and this is House of Roots and Ruin by Erin A. Craig. I had a hard time deciding where I wanted to put this book on the list. It could have easily been in my top 5, in my top 10, but I put it at 14th. Because of just comparing it to the other books on this list, I don't know that it was impactful for me. What I loved about this book, it was just plain fun. I don't think another book on my list or even that I read this year gave me as much whiplash as this book did. This is the sequel. It's more of a companion novel to House of Salt and Sorrows, which I also did reread this year. But the sequel is far superior in my mind, even though I do like book 1. There's something about the tone of this one that is different. The first book I would call eerie, haunting, atmospheric. This next one is disturbing. It's a bit more graphic. It's a bit more out there. It's just kind of strange, and I loved it. At the beginning, it took me a while to get used to it, but there is a certain moment that happens where I just couldn't put this down. I was reading all day. When I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about it. I thought about it long after I finished it. I talked about it with friends. I tried to get people to read it with me. Now I'm scared because I read the first book with the Book Checkout Book Club and they didn't like the first book as much as I did. So now I'm feeling kind of precious about House of Roots and Ruin, and I don't want them to read it. You know how that is. But if you're just looking for a twisty book, if you want a little bit of a romance, I don't think the romance is at the forefront of this one as much as it is in the first book. So if you didn't love the romance in the first book and that's been putting you off from trying the sequel, I would suggest still giving it a try because there are romantic elements in it, but it's not as heavy-handed as it was in book 1. I'm kind of just in awe of Erin A. Craig's mind, to be honest with you. We're getting a 3rd book in this series, I think in 2025 or 2026, so we have a bit of a wait, but we had to wait for this one, and it was worth it. I'm not even going to tell you the character that this book follows, because I think even knowing that it follows this character spoils some of the events that happen in book 1, and I still think you should read book 1. You could read this one as a standalone, but I think it's worth checking out the first book anyways, so I'm not going to give you any more details than that, other than to tell you if you like graphic, out there, twisty books, if you want to be immersed in a page turner and then have something that you'll continue to think about and just want to gush about and talk about and just act with friends, House of Roots and Ruins is the book for you. I adored Love and Other Disasters when I read it last year, and I knew that Anita Kelly was an author who I wanted to keep an eye on, but Something Wild and Wonderful coming in at 13th place solidified Anita Kelly as an auto-buy author for me. I just love what they do with their characters and their romances. I think they write some of the best chemistry that I have read in romances in a long time, and I feel for these characters. There's just something about them that gets under my skin, and they feel real to me. I also love that their books are all set in the same universe, so there are cameos from Love and Other Disasters in this book, and then I am reading an e-arc of their 3rd book, How You Get the Girl, and there are characters from this book and that one. So I love those connections. It's great to see my beloved characters, but this one is like the movie or the memoir Wild, but make it queer and make it a romance. I just thought that this was so charming. I think that this is the only book in 2023 that I stayed up late into the night reading. I haven't done that in years. I was a mess. I had tears rolling down my face. It was a disaster, but I couldn't sleep without knowing what happened to these 2 characters. And I wasn't crying because it is sad, though there are some sad moments and conversations about your family not accepting you once you come out to them. So if that is difficult for you, I wouldn't pick this up, though I thought that was discussed really well, and I think that that is probably really relatable for a lot of people. But that is a heavy theme in this one, and there are also some conversations about anxiety. I thought that was really handled well, but what really got me crying was just how damn sweet these 2 were. They are so respectful of one another, so sweet to one another, and I just think they get one another, which was so great to read about. So it follows Alexi and Ben. They're on these, I think it's, what trail is it? I am not a hiker, but it's a Pacific Crest Trail. But they have this run-in, they have this instant connection, though they are complete opposites. And they keep running into one another on the trail, and then they decide to hike together eventually. And they have great conversations about their lives and their families and their reasons for being on the hike. One is more goofy and extroverted, and the other is more shy. Oh, I just loved it so much. We see them on their breaks and staying at a hotel and getting food together. It's just, oh, I love this so much. I'm talking about this and it makes me want to reread it. But I have an e-arc of their next one, so I could just do that. But this is just so good. Everybody needs to read it. One of my favorite romances ever. Another one of my favorite romances coming in at 12th place is Only for the Weak by Natasha Bishop. I love this book so much. I had to get a copy of it. This is a mess. I feel like every year I have a book on my list that is a bit of a messy romance, but sometimes I can eat that up if it's done well. And this is the book that made me realize why I like books centered around weddings as much as I do. It's because just the dynamic of a wedding and everything that can go wrong surrounding a wedding means that the conflict in the story can be external and not within the couple themselves. And that is certainly the case in this book, where our couple was solid, but everybody else was a disaster, even though these 2 characters had to pretend they weren't together at all. So we're following Janelle, and it opens up with her at the airport about to go to her sister's wedding. It's a destination wedding. Her and the wedding party are going a week prior to plan things and just relax. And we learn that her sister is actually marrying Janelle's ex-boyfriend. Janelle is fine with this, which is a shock, but it's okay. She realizes she never loved her ex anyways. She just hates the pitying looks that everybody's giving her. She hates that her mother seems to think that she's going to be so down about this. So she just wants to go, put on a brave face, have a good time, come home, get it over with. But the best man, or one of the groomsmen, Rome, is somebody that she knows but has always avoided her for reasons we find out, and they have intense chemistry and they start hooking up. It's super steamy, but she doesn't want people to think that she's hooking up with him to prove something, so they keep it a secret. I loved that forbidden romance of it, them sneaking into each other's hotel rooms at this really fancy tropical resort. I was here for it. But obviously we get the mess of the sister marrying her ex-boyfriend, and yeah, it becomes a bit of a disaster, but I ate this up. And I loved a lot of the side characters. Her best friend is fantastic. She has a budding romance, so I'm hopeful that this becomes a series. There's another character, another one of the bridesmaids, who is also getting a bit of a romance with one of the groomsmen, so I'm hoping we learn more about those characters and they get their own romances, because I just loved everything about this friend group. And this is so self-aware. There's a moment where Janelle is on a boat reading a book, reading a romance, I think on her Kindle. She must have KU. And she's talking about book boyfriends and the ultimate book boyfriend, and then Rome comes, he decides to read the book too, and they talk about it. So it feels like Rome is the ultimate book boyfriend. Natasha Bishop knows that, and it's a bit of a fan service, and I ate that up. Rome's one of my favorite characters ever. I also adored Janelle. I could talk about this forever for a book that is so short. Another one I want to reread on the beach. I just love this with my whole heart, and I hope we get more in the series. In 11th place is not a romance. This is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This is a book that I had my eye on as soon as I saw the cover. I'm not gonna lie to you, this covers everything. As I say in a lot of videos, Tom Roberts has become one of my favorite illustrators. I don't think you could look at this cover as a book lover and not adore it. So that's why it went on my TBR initially. Obviously I've heard of Mark Lawrence. His name's up here. Obviously I've heard of Mark Lawrence, but this seemed very different from everything else I know about him, and I've been curious about his other series, but not to the level that I was curious about this one. And then I saw that he posted a giveaway on Twitter. Over 1,000 people entered that giveaway, and somehow I won. I don't know what to tell you. I actually signed this to Kristen. You beat 1,000 to 1 odds, keep winning Mark Lawrence. So I love that. And the fact that I won that is probably the reason why I read this as soon as I did. I'm not sure that I ever would have gotten to it, because it's one of those things that's intimidating to me. I annotated the crap out of this, but it's long. There's a lot more world building. It's more fantasy than I've been in the mood for this year. Sometimes I do like an epic fantasy. It just wasn't my vibe for 2023 for some reason, but this was the exception. And it is a love letter to libraries and bookstores and books in general at the end of the day. So you know what, it worked for me, and I thought it was beautiful. And of course I tabbed it and loved it, and the sequel is one of my most anticipated books of 2024. We get 2 POVs in this book, and both of them were interesting to me, and they both find themselves in this mysterious library that is pretty much a labyrinth, and we see how they come together and come apart, and how they're learning more about the library, but they also have their separate lives and are in very different situations. It's just incredible. You have to read it. It's so wonderfully written. I think that this is just masterful in the world building and the characterization, and I think the romance that we're getting in this as well. I just ate this up, and it's definitely deserves its spot on my list of favorites. Do you see what I mean? We're moving on to my top 10, but I loved all of these books so much, I couldn't just have them as honorable mention. Truly, they're favorites. So I'm happy with my decision to make it a top 15, but moving into top 10, in the 10th spot, we have Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. I read the first 2 books in the series. I will explain. This book, I loved it. It is sci-fi fantasy, and I think it does that so well. So many people say it's gay Star Wars, and it does really read like that, but not in a way that feels cliche or too on the nose. I think it's its own story, its own characters. I think that Django Wexler created a really interesting world. The magic system was intriguing to me. There's a bit of a mystery element that keeps you reading, and it's another one that's told in dual POV. That is something that I like. I like fantasy to have 2 perspectives. Once we start introducing more, it's too much for me, but 2 perspectives, maybe 3, is perfect for me. And in this case, we're following a brother and a sister who were separated when they were children and are now on different sides of a rebellion. And I cared about Gear and Maya equally, which is so hard to pull off. And I think a lot of that has to do with the side characters in both of their perspectives. They have some great relationships brewing and interactions, and actually there's some humor in this as well. So while there's some serious topics happening in here and conversations, and obviously some like end of the world things going on, there is some lightness that is brought to it that I thought was amazing. And I was just reading this book waiting for their reunion. That is the moment that I wanted. I wanted to see this brother and sister come together on opposite sides and to see what they would do, and I ate this up. It was so good. I need to reread this and annotate it because it's just calling for me to do that. And then I finished this. I tried to move on to something new, I think even for a book club, and I kept thinking about it. So I picked up the sequel right away, which is unheard of for me, or at least it was at the beginning of 2023 because I'm changed. And I love that one just as much. In a lot of ways, it felt like the same story retold, but we did learn a few things. We got more character depth, relationships started to form more, and I was happy with it. And then I was like, I need to read the third book, but I'm just not ready. I'm not ready to be away from these characters. I love them so much, but at some point, I'm gonna need the answers. I need to know what's happening because we're building up to something in this story for sure. And I got a gift card for Christmas and I ordered the third book, so that should be here today actually. I don't have time to read it in January. My TBR is too huge for the Once Upon a Readathon, but maybe in February I can sneak it in and finally get the answers that I desire. And then I can go and read Django Wexler's backlist because I'm hoping that all of his books have this sense of humor that I think is really unique to him and just really works and helps you connect with these characters. Love this book so much. So thankful that I started this series. It feels like I've been talking about new releases so much that it's nice to just sit in front of the camera and gush about books that I have read. And in 9th place, we have Radiance by Grace Draven. This is one of the first fantasy romance I read this year, and I have been comparing every fantasy romance I've read since, and there have been a few of them, to this book, and none of them can compare, no matter how good they are. You may have noticed that Serpent and the Wings of Night, the sequel, the novella in between are not on my list. As much as I adored them, they might have made my top 20. They just were no Radiance, and I just think that this is peak fantasy romance for me, and it's probably one of those things, my first one that I read within the genre, that is the one that stayed with me, but I really just do think it is that good. It has a trope that I've never come across before, disgust to love. So these two are completely different species. They are attractive to people of their kind, but they are not attractive to one another. They think each other are hideous. They can't stand the way the other one looks, but they are in this political marriage, which they are both open to. They're willing to do this, and they're happy about it in some ways, and they have a run-in before their wedding. They don't even realize who they're talking to, and they have a connection that is friendly. They have great banter right away. So it isn't enemies to lovers at all. It's friends to lovers, but they are just disgusted by one another's appearance. And slowly as the book goes on, as their friendship builds, so does a physical attraction. And then they become obsessed with each other. And oh, I love it so much. It is so fun. And on top of all that, we're getting great fantasy. I think that this is a good balance between romance and fantasy. I was actually very intrigued by the world and the politics. There's a lot of politics at play. Our hero has a complicated family, and we learn more about that and how our heroine fits into that. I don't know. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It's another one that I'm sitting here and thinking I want to reread, but what I really should do is continue on with the series because I kept meaning to do that throughout 2023 and it just never happened. And I think that the second book at least follows these same characters, so why am I putting that off? I love these characters, I love this trope, I love the politics, I love this world. Fantastic. If you know anything that compares to this one, let me know. And really, I should probably just read more of Grace Draven's books and series because I know she has quite a few. In 8th spot, we have a book from an author who I finally read from in 2023, and she's quickly become a favorite, and this is Real by Kennedy Ryan. I read a few of her books in 2023. I love them all, but Real is my favorite, and again, it's the one I started with. But I just think that, I know that I said Rome is my favorite book boyfriend, but as I'm sitting here, maybe Canon is. I love him so much. He is so respectful. This also is a mess in the beginning in the same way that Only for the Weak is a mess, which I think is interesting. But I think that this one is a little bit deeper. It's more romantic. There is a different storyline woven through that I really appreciated. So we are following Neva, who is an aspiring actress, and Cannon is a director. He goes to one of her plays. He is entranced by her and he hires her for his next movie. He has a past where he had a relationship with an actress, and he's told himself that he would never do that again, but he's pulled to Neva. And she has a chronic illness, which obviously affects her life and their relationship. And I thought that that was really well done, and I think a lot of people will relate to Neva as a character. But we really just see them fall in love, navigate some difficult situations, especially when it comes to her family, her finding her voice and her passion for her career and him being respectful of their power dynamics, because it could have easily gone off the rails with him being the director and her being the actress. But he was very, very well aware of that situation and he was respectful of it. There's a lot of consent. There's a scene with a bathtub that I just thought was so beautiful. It's just amazing. And Kennedy Ryan really knows how to write characters. She knows how to write emotional depth. She knows how to write about hard stuff that feels so real, and I think you'll cry. And I think if you relate to these characters in any way, it might actually be helpful for you. So I just think that Kennedy Ryan's incredible. Don't be surprised if I have a Kennedy Ryan book on my 2024 best list, because I'm hoping to make a good dent in her backlist throughout the rest of the year, and I know I'm gonna love all her stuff. In 7th spot is a last minute entry. It's a book I read in December, so I haven't talked about it too much on my channel, but this is The Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst. I love this. I should have known that I would love this. A friend recommended it to me, and I know my friend is watching and is just feeling so good about herself that she was right, because she was. This is everything that I love. There is an enchanted forest, creepy forest. There is a school that has a competition. There's an animal companion that is a wolf who I absolutely adored. There are spirits that use the power of fire, earth, water, ice, things like that. And then there are women within this world who are able to control the spirits. And there are very few of them. And those who can are sent to this school. So we have that school setting where they are entered into a competition to become potential heirs for the queen. So when the queen dies, and she's the one who's ultimately controlling all of the spirits, these spirits absolutely hate humanity, so these queens are very necessary. So when she dies, she will have her next heir. So this book in particular follows Delina, and she is not the strongest contestant in this competition by any means. She does not think she has any chance of winning, and we just follow her story. You learn a lot about the world in this book. And then I did something that I haven't done probably since the Hunger Games. If I am actually trying to think back on it, I marathoned the entire series in 3 days, 4 days. I loved it so much. I think the second book is just as good as this one. You are introduced to a whole new character who has a perspective, and there are strong themes of motherhood in that one, and I thought that adding that new character was probably necessary to add more richness to the story, to see more of the world than just through the eyes of the character in this book. And the character in the second book actually is more powerful, so I love that. We get some romances as well. There's 2 romances. We have a romance developing in this book and then a different romance in the second one. The third book was good. It was good. It wasn't as good as these two. The first 2 books were 5 stars and the third one was a 4. So I cannot complain about it. I wasn't sold exactly on the ending. I liked the ending, but I feel like we were teased for something that we didn't quite get, but it all made sense to me in the end. I can't really tell you much more than that. Sarah Beth Durst is an author I'm going to look out for in the future. I know she has a release coming out in 2024 called The Spell Shop that is at the top of my list. I was looking at her backlist. She has quite the range. There's that one, it's like an iconic cover. I forget what it's called now, but it's like a vampire sipping blood from a Coke bottle. I might have to try that. Sounds very different from this, but I just thought this was beautiful. If you have found that our reading taste in terms of fantasy is at all similar, you have to try this. It has the cozy vibes without being cozy fantasy, and it does have fantasy romance elements. I just thought there was so much balance, and it was just fantastic. I love it. I can't stop talking about it, but I will move on. This next book is part of a series that I have talked about throughout 2023 all the time. It's probably my most talked about series at this point. If I have a chance to recommend it or just talk about it, I'm gonna take it. It is that good. And this is the Mead Mishap series. But I told myself I would just pick one book in a series for this video, and I had to go with the second one, The Time I Got Drunk and Needed a Love Potion at a Werewolf, which just flies off the tongue for me now because I've said it so many times. I think if you're gonna only read one book in the series, make it this one, though you should read them all. You should read the first book, the novella comes after that, and then the 2 books afterwards. Well, the newest book I liked. It wasn't my absolute favorite, but that's not the point of this video. The second book is everything, and I think that is because it has the tropes that I like and it has a hero I like. This is my first monster romance, and again, I think I started with the best monster romance there is, and I've tried to find ones that compare to this, and I have not been successful at that. I want to make a video that was like, read these books if you loved the Mead Mishap series, but I'm struggling with that. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know because it's been a struggle. I want to be somebody who loves monster romance, But it just feels like I started at the top and now everything's kind of disappointing me, which is kind of sad. But I can't complain because I love this book so much. I love this series so much. I think Kimberly Lemming is one to look out for. The first book has just been picked up by Orbit and is now out. It came out at the beginning of January. I have ordered it. It should be on its way to me soon. I do like the new covers. They have grown on me. But the second book follows Bree and Felix. Felix is a werewolf, and through a series of unfortunate events, she accidentally throws a love potion at him and he becomes obsessed with her, and now she's confused if he actually loves her or if it's just a love potion, but he thinks that she is his mate. He's determined that that is true, and he just falls for her first, obviously, and is so charming. I just love him. I'm a cinnamon roll lover at the end of this day. Give me a cinnamon roll over a bad boy. That is just what I like. That's probably why this one works best for me in this series. I just liked these characters. It was so wholesome. I also liked that we just stayed in this small town the entire time. But there is a bit of a mystery. There's more plot to this than you might think, but it's steamy. It's ridiculous. It's fun. It's hilarious. Love it so much. In fifth place, we have The Witch Would Not by Olivia Atwater. Olivia Atwater is another author who's quickly becoming one of my favorites. Before this year, I didn't think I liked fae stories, but I have been proven wrong between this book and a book that is also on my list that I would talk about soon. Apparently I like fae, they just have to be a specific kind. Obviously Olivia Atwater is best known for Half a Soul, which I also read this year and also really loved, almost made my list, thought it was fantastic. But The Witch Would Not is set in the same universe. It's just Victorian instead of Regency, and if you made me choose between the two, I'm a Victorian girl because it's more gothic, it leads a little bit darker, and that is very much true. In this case, we are following a caregiver named Winnie who is doing a favor for an old friend. So she's going to this old manor to be caretaker for this friend's grandson. I knew I was gonna love this book. I say this every time, but it's just so true. I knew I was gonna love it when Winnie walks in the house and the house bites her. It hates her. It's like, oh, yes, this is so for me. And I love a haunted house story. I love a book where the house is sentient, but I can't say I've ever read one where it wasn't haunted by ghosts, it was haunted by fae. And I thought that that was really unique and lent itself well, and it really did make sense. So we're following Winnie as she's being a caretaker to this boy who's Ron. He's not the best, but he grows as you read the book, and you grow to like him. Sometimes when there's kids in books, you kind of just hate their guts, or they have no depth, or they're just used as a plot beat. They don't feel like real characters in and of themselves, and he did. So I really appreciated that. There's a very, 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 very slow burn romance. It's a very slow burn. I wasn't sold on it at first, but it grew on me, and I'm excited to see how that develops in future books. Obviously, we get the fae. We see our main character, Winnie, enter into this kind of fae world within this house. It's out there, okay? I loved it. I ate this up. So if you liked Half a Soul, give this one a try. It's set in the same universe. It's just a little bit darker, a little bit more gothic. I apologize if the camera angle changed at all. I was gushing so much and talking so much that my battery died. So moving on to my fourth favorite book of the year is actually a graphic novel. I love graphic novels. I don't read them as much as I should. I don't know if that one has ever been on my best books of the year, but this is one of my favorite books of all time. It's my favorite graphic novel ever. And this is The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich by Daya Munez. And yeah, I ate this up. This is so beautiful. First of all, the illustrations are everything. My mission in life is to get everybody to read this. Actually, I'm gonna reread this in January because one of the teams for Once Upon a Readathon is the Snow Princess team. And there's a buddy read going on for this book. So I'm crashing, I'm joining. You can read this in half an hour and it'll just make your life. If you need a warm hug, if you need a smile on your face, pick this up. It's cheesy, pun intended. We're following these two characters who live in a world where everything is named after cheese. This is Lady Camembert and this is Princess Brie. So two books on my list have characters with the first name Brie. I don't know what that is about, but I am all about it, and they both love cheese. So you know what, that's obviously my vibe. So anyways, this is following Lady Camembert, whose father is sick, and it's actually quite sad in the beginning. He is dying and he wants her to have his inheritance, but she is a lady, and in order to do that she has to be married, and she does not want to get married. And the father suspected that, so he came up with another plan to have her move to a different city, pretend to be a boy, and then she can have his inheritance. So when he passes away, that is what she does, and she takes her caretaker with her, and she ends up entranced in this whole world with the royals, and she becomes best friends with Princess Bree, pretending to be this boy the entire time. So she's very torn and conflicted, and she's falling for Bree, and they have a romance. Okay, it is so cute. They eat grilled cheese sandwiches together. There's lots of cheese talk. What is the city called? It's named after cheese too. It's not coming to me. Oh, the Kingdom of Fromage. Of course, that's what it's called. And yeah, it's everything. You have to read this. It is my favorite graphic novel ever, and I'm excited to reread it in January. Okay, moving on to my top 3, and in 3rd position, you might be able to tell if you look at the shelf and what's missing, what series this is. Well, I'm gonna pick one book in the series, but it is the Wayfair series, and I just want to use this as an excuse to show off these stunning Illuminate Crate editions. They are my prized possession. Look at them. These are beautiful. I love them so much. They make me so happy on my shelves, and I just think that this series is written for me. It's perfect. So let's talk about it. The first book, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, is a reread for me, so I'm not going to include that one, though it is a favorite. I read this in 2018. I looked to see when the first time I picked this book up was, and that was all those years ago. And I've said since then that it is one of my favorite books of all time, and the reread solidified that for me. But I finally continued on with the series in 2023 because, as I said at the beginning of this video, I'm a changed person. I will now read series. So I finally reread this for the book checkout book club. I loved it the most, but everybody seemed to like it well enough, and then I read the rest of the series. They were all great. The second book I loved. The third book was good. It's Becky Chambers. It's part of the Wayfair series. Of course, I really, really liked it, but it was my least favorite because it was too focused on humans. That's not why I'm reading a space opera. By the way, these are space opera, did I say? Anyways, that is why, not why I pick up a space opera to read about humans. Though I think all the books in the series really are, at the end of the day, highlighting humanity and conversations about humanity, but done in more subtle ways. Some of her messaging is a little on the nose, but I love it. So what can I say? But my favorite book in the series was actually the last one, The Galaxy and the Ground Within. If you don't want to read the entire series, I think you can just read the first one and this last one and you'll be fine. Because they all follow different characters. There's not really a through line throughout them, except that there's one character or a few characters in each of the books that knows the captain of the ship from the first one. Honestly, that is the only connection. Let me put this book down. But in this one, there's a bit of a found family element, and we're following all of these characters who are at like a service station. They need to gas up their spaceships, and then the power goes out and they are trapped there. And they're all from different species and cultures. A lot of them that have histories where they do not get along, they should not get along, but they're forced together. It's forced proximity, and they're forced to kind of survive together. Even though it's not deadly, they're just waiting for communications, but there's a lot of anxiety and stress that comes with that. They need to share meals, they just need to keep one another company, and it's the conversations that they are having. And we learn a lot about the world through these conversations about their different cultures. Peak Becky Chambers in my mind. I'm so happy I have these editions. I'm so happy I finally read this series, and it made my top 3, and it's definitely one of my favorite series of all time. I know some of you were waiting for this one. This is the other book on my list in the second spot that proved to me that I can like fae stories, and this is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I annotated it. I read it twice this year. I'm reading it for a 3rd time before the sequel comes out. I'm a fan. What can I say? I love it so much. It's so wholesome. It's hilarious. If you have read, what's that series called? I will always be grateful for that series because it is the way that I met everybody from the book checkout book club, even though it wasn't the greatest series in the end. What is it called? Oh, the Lady Trent series. The Memoirs of Lady Trent. And you liked that? I think there's potential you will love this. I obviously love this quite a bit more, but it's that kind of tone where you're following a bit of a curmudgeon who is a scholar, and she is studying fae, and in Lady Trent she's studying dragons, same thing, and writing her journals of what she learns. So she goes to this isolated village, and it's perfect to read in the wintertime, just saying, and is just writing about the fae there and ignoring the villagers. She wants nothing to do with them, and then her rival shows up and disrupts everything. He's getting to know the villagers, he's always under her feet, and she realizes that maybe she has feelings for him. Okay, it's so good. But there's a lot of great fantasy in here, a lot of discussions about different types of fae. There is a bit of a mystery as well as that romance. Some wonderful side characters of people in this village. Yeah, I ate it up. Can't wait to reread it. Can't wait to talk about it, because I will continue to gush about this book until the end of time and continue to reread it. So what can I say? You've heard me talk about it a million times at this point, and I'm sorry if you're tired of it. Let's move on. And then last, but certainly not least, my favorite book of the year, my new favorite book of all time, Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. You were right. So many people told me, this is such a Kristen book. Kristen, why haven't you read Daughter of the Forest? You're gonna love it. It's so for you, and that's why I didn't pick it up. There was too much pressure on this book for me. I put it on 1,000 TBRs for the last couple years and just finally caved in November and read it, and everybody was right. I don't know. You guys know my reading taste more than I know myself, and yeah, it was fantastic. It's a favorite, my favorite book of all time. I think I like it more than Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I didn't think was possible. So there you go. You were right. This is actually a book, I think it came out in 1999, and Juliette Marillier is like a really beloved author. I don't know how I missed her as a teenager, and I'm sad for my younger self, but I'm happy for me that I finally read it. I'm going to explore more of her backlist. Super atmospheric, so beautifully written. It is a retelling of the Six Swans Tale. It's following Sorsha, who has an evil stepmother, and this stepmother turns all of Sorsha's 6 brothers into swans. And in order to bring them back, she has to spend years without talking, and she has to weave together these shirts. It makes sense in context of the book. So we follow her throughout the years as she is taking on this terrible task and suffering for it, living alone. There's a scene that happens that she prepares you for. People prepared me for it before I picked this up, where she is essayed, and it is on page. And it is hard to read about. I struggled with it. I was prepared for it. It's deeply emotional, but I thought that it was handled well. And I think that what I really liked best about how that all was handled was that we see the effects that that has had on her throughout the rest of the story. I think a lot of times in fantasy, those scenes are just things that happen to women and we move on. But in this one, it's deeply felt. The people around her, her brothers, the love interest in here, they recognize the way that this has affected her, and I appreciated that about it. So I thought that was handled well, but no going into it that that is something that is going to happen. This was a good reminder for me of how much I like books, fantasy and historical fiction in particular, that take place over a number of years, where you're following one character throughout the decades. My best book of 2024 was Still Life by Sarah Winman, which was a historical fiction, but it did the same thing. There's just something about that that hits for me, because at the end of the day, I'm a character-driven reader. So getting to spend decades with the same character and seeing them grow and seeing the struggles and the victories that they have throughout their life is something that works for me and I really like. So I think that's a lot of why this hit for me. We follow Sorsha as a child into her adulthood as she goes through quite a lot, as you can imagine, and then her falling in love and her connection with her brothers. There are moments once a year where her brothers are turned into men again, and seeing their relationships and the things they're going through as well. And I think the rest of the books in the series follow the brothers, so I am very invested in that. There's some brothers that I absolutely adored, because I think you're supposed to, they get more page time than others, but yeah, so beautifully written. Everybody was right. Juliette Marillier has the potential to become a new favorite author for me, because she wrote my favorite book of all time. So there we have it. I had so much fun reading in 2023, posting videos, talking to you all in the comments. Let me know what your favorite book of the year was, and I'm just excited to see what 2024 brings. And before you know it, I'll be talking about my best books of 2024, because the time just goes by so fast. Thank you again for your support. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.